everyone, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with another trope video, and this time I'm going to be talking about horror books that take place in an asylum setting. And surprisingly, there's a little bit of variety here. Alright, so not all of these were my favorite books ever. I'm going to be starting with the ones that I liked the least and working my way up to the one that I liked the most. So first up, this is kind of a tie for the book that I liked the least, but I'm going to be telling you about, first of all, The Ward by S.L. Gray. This was published in 2012, and S.L. Gray is two authors writing together. I think it's Sarah Lotz and, oh, it says right here, Sarah Lotz and Louis Greenberg. I'm not sure, I've never read anything by Louis Greenberg, but they're both authors from South Africa. So that was kind of interesting. Now, let's see. This one isn't quite what I imagined it to be as far as the asylum setting goes. When I looked books up for this trope, because, you know, I have to plan far ahead with these things. This one came up as a book that takes place in an asylum. It's called The Ward. However, I feel like this is more like a medical ward after all. So this one is a little bit different than the other ones that I read. There are two characters that we follow in this book. One is named Farrell and the other is named Lisa. Lisa is there because she is addicted to plastic surgery and she wants a procedure done, and no reputable doctors will do this procedure. So she has to resort to using a hospital that is kind of like, how can I explain this? Because I don't know a ton about the way that medical insurance in South Africa works, but this seems kind of like a hospital that you would get sent to if you have like Medicare or Medicaid, whatever it is now. Also, I live in California, so there's Medi-Cal, but that's not everywhere. So kind of like a county hospital, a hospital that's, I don't know, and I don't mean to disparage hospitals like that. However, it's not as if she's going to a place that specializes in plastic surgery, you know what I mean? Like, she has to resort to using doctors who maybe aren't quite as skilled in the procedure that she wants to get done as another doctor would be. And so they call it New Hope. But its nickname is No Hope because it's such a shitty place to be stuck in. And Farrell, however, he does have medical insurance, so he's very confused when he wakes up in this hospital and he can't see. So he is like, why am I here and what has happened to me? Because he doesn't remember anything happening to him. He just wakes up in this hospital. He knows, though, the last thing he does remember is that he had a fight with his girlfriend, and he's got like bits and pieces of a memory where he doesn't know why they were fighting, but he remembers like blood being involved, so he doesn't know if he's hurt her, and he can't contact anybody. Like, the nurses there won't let him contact anyone. So Farrell and Lisa kind of try to team up to get out of there, because eventually Lisa decides she doesn't want to be there either. This is a book that is sort of part of a series, but they can also be standalone novels. They just have like this tie-in to this place that is called The Downside, which is like, I don't know, a world within our world, a world under our world. I don't know, but the people speak differently. There's some weird medical stuff going on and things like that. It's just slightly different than the way we do things, and it's a little bit grotesque even. So as far as how I felt about this book, I really liked the times that we saw like what the downside is like, and when we saw characters from the downside, but I didn't really like either Farrell or Lisa. They were both flawed characters, which I do like. However, I just like their personalities were just so, I don't know, irritating. They were irritating together. And that really, you know, we're following them for the majority of the story. They really only have interactions with the downside a few times. And so like that part that I liked is just not in there enough for me. And I didn't really love Lisa or Farrell. This is very slow paced. I don't like the characters. I thought the plot was just okay. And I don't know, that's really all I can say about it without giving too much away. There were some really interesting aspects to this, but that it just wasn't enough to change my opinion on the parts that I didn't like, I guess. All right, on to the next book that I read that does take place in an asylum. This is The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse, and this is more of a thriller book than a horror, but there are some deaths in this. This is about Ellen, and Ellen is a detective who is taking a break from her job. She gets invited to this hotel called Lissa May, I think, and the hotel used to be a sanatorium, and it's been recently revamped. It's very fancy, and the architects have incorporated its history like into the architecture, and they have on display like old weird medical stuff and things like that. And so it's just kind of morbid to begin with. Ellen is invited there to celebrate her brother's engagement, and her brother's getting engaged to someone she used to be friends with and has fallen out with. And her relationship with her brother is also really strained. So it's just kind of, it's very complicated right away. And not in a bad way. I really like complicated relationships. I think it makes characters feel more realistic. I mean, everyone has complicated relationships. So I really did like the setup for this. I did like the setting for this. But this turns into sort of a mystery and a murder mystery. Ellen's brother's fiance goes missing. At the same time, the hotel is like kind of being put on lockdown, I guess, because there is a huge storm coming and this hotel is in the Alps. So if you get stuck there while it's snowing, like you just can't drive down the mountain. So it's kind of, what do they call those? A locked door mystery, I think, where there are these murders happening. There's this mystery happening and the characters can't leave this one location, which I do like. But I think kind of like with the ward, the parts that I did like just couldn't outweigh the parts that I didn't like. I really didn't like Ellen's character. I didn't connect with any of the characters there. There is kind of this mystery about why has a strained relationship with her brother, like what happened, and you know, they give you little fish crumbs through that, and I thought that the reveal of that wasn't that interesting. I thought the reveal of, you know, who was behind these deaths wasn't very interesting, but I did really like the setting. So it's like, man, that sucks that, you know, the plot just wasn't as interesting as the setting ended up being. Really, this hotel, it's just so, the history is so morbid and the setting is so morbid. Using a building where people were held against their will and experimented on against their will and were not treated right, you know, because this is an asylum. I mean, we really just don't have those anymore in the way that, you know, this is where, you know, people were kept against their will, and we treated mental illness where like it could be shocked out of somebody. It's got an interesting history. However, I don't know, I just didn't like it wasn't all that thrilling. It was very slow paced. A book that I liked a little bit better, however, was Walkers by Ramsey Campbell. This came out in 1989, and this definitely has an asylum setting. This is about a guy named Jack Reed. And you know what? Jack Reed is a very typical like 1970s, 1980s guy in a book where he just thinks everything belongs to him, and he is kind of a boring, like, typical dude. I don't know. I don't find characters like that very compelling because he's just an everyman, you know what I mean? And he's not even, I don't know, he's like not, how do I explain this? He's so typical and fucking boring, and he's just, you know, the guy who thinks that everything should be going his way and is really surprised when it doesn't. So he finds this building in the woods. He has like a car accident, and he follows this apparition down to where this weird building kind of in the woods is, and it's just like a huge, like, dilapidated building. He goes inside, it's unlocked, and it's very strange because it's like everybody just disappeared out of thin air. Like, people were having dinner and disappeared, and people were in their rooms and disappeared. Like, all the things that you would have around you as, like, a person who is just doing their normal everyday thing is still there, but, like, the people are not. But he really becomes drawn to this building, and he decides he's going to buy it and turn it into a country club. But Jack finds out that he might not be the only person interested in this building, because there are inmates in the walls still. And it turns out that these inmates, and I don't feel like this is a spoiler, it's in the dust jacket, it's in the synopsis, the inmates used some sort of spell to try to escape from this building, but instead got caught, like, in the earth. So they can manipulate the earth, and the building, like, they can come out of the walls almost, but it's like, it's not like they're moving through the walls, it's like they're moving the walls. Kind of like this picture here, you know? And something happens, and Jack is forced to choose between saving his family and potentially letting all these killers out, because this wasn't an asylum for people who were just mentally ill. It was an asylum for criminals who were mentally ill. And so yeah, I mean, I feel like I would have liked this a lot more if the mystery of what was in the walls would have been not explained to us right away. If there had been more of a mystery, but, like, it's in the synopsis, and it's just very quickly in the book too, you know what I mean? Like, it comes up very quickly in the book, and I don't know. Jack was just such a typical boring dude who yells at his wife and wants to bang his secretary, and, you know, it's just, I don't know. He's just not a likable character, and not in a good way either. So, I mean, that's it. I guess that's all I have to say about Walkers. The beginning was pretty good. I liked this more than The Ward and the Sanatorium, but I think it was just okay. This is the first time I've read Ramsey no. Oh, did I say that this was by Ramsey Campbell? I feel like I did. This is by Graham Masterton, and this is the first time I've read Graham Masterton, and I can't say I'm super impressed. But I saw some reviews, you know, saying that this isn't his best work. So hopefully I can find some Masterton that I do like, because, you know, he's much beloved. And I'm finding more and more that, I don't know, I'm trying new things, but sometimes I just don't like these older horror authors who are dudes. And I feel like that's so cliche of, like, me. But they're just so, they write the most fucking boring characters. Like, it's like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't even know exactly how to explain what I'm feeling about this, but the book was just fine. This, however, I did really enjoy. This is The Devil in Silver by Victor LaValle, and this actually takes place in an asylum, and kind of like, but also unlike The Ward, because this is actually a mental asylum, or a mental ward. The characters are patients, which I think might be what I liked that was lacking in some of these other books. This was also published in 2012, and this is about Pepper, who gets into an altercation, and he thinks that instead of the police booking him, they just didn't want to deal with that, so they dumped him at the local mental institution. And this takes place in New York, so there is just such a great variety of characters. Pepper himself is an interesting character because he really doesn't think he belongs there, but as we go along, at least me, myself, I thought he definitely had some things that he needed to work on. But he meets so many different interesting people here. But the big like plot is that there are lots of people in this ward, in this institution, but there's also something that comes out of the ceiling and is hurting the patients, and it looks like a buffalo. And the patients there are fucking terrified, and it seems like the nurses and the staff there know about this, and I don't know, they don't really try to cover it up, I guess, but they kind of gaslight anyone who says anything about it and makes them feel like they're crazy. Like, of course you're crazy, you're here. Like, you're just seeing things. Nothing's there, it's fine. But patients are getting hurt and patients are going missing. And Pepper really wants to get to the bottom of this. And this is, I think, a slower paced book. It's really character driven. So the plot itself isn't necessarily like what sets the pace of the book, you know what I mean? They obviously talk about it and they get to it, but a lot of this is like the day-to-day of the people in this ward and their relationships with each other and trying to get out of here, especially Pepper, because he really just doesn't think he belongs there. And there are parts that are really sad and parts that are funny, and this was a really good book. This is the second time I've tried Victor LaValle. I read The Ballad of Black Tom, which I didn't really love. I don't really like cosmic horror, I don't think. This one was a little more set in reality, more of a sort of realistic horror, I guess, and I really liked it. I just really liked the characters in this, and it made such a huge difference in how I felt about this versus how I felt about these other books. I think that the main character and, you know, the side characters, the minor characters, being patients in the ward is really what made it more interesting to me, rather than them like, I don't know, trying to buy an asylum or vacationing at a former asylum. Yeah, but I think that's all I have to say about The Devil in Silver. It's a big book, but I feel like it's a really rewarding book. All right, well, those are the 4 books. Well, kind of like more like 3 that take place in an asylum. The ward is kind of an outlier there, and I'm kind of bummed about it. It just like, it came up and it sounded like from the synopsis, it was going to be sort of more like a medical, or less like a medical ward, more like a mental illness, mental institution sort of thing, and it just wasn't. But I've read it and I told you about it. I don't know. I picked it. It didn't really work out, but I picked it for this. Anyway, I would love to know if you have any suggestions for books that take place in an asylum or have characters that are in an asylum. I really like The Devil in Silver. If you get anything from this video, I think it should be that you should probably read The Devil in Silver. That's all I have though. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you later. Goodbye.